Hi, I'm Jeremy, the Zoo Nerd, coming to you live from my backyard in beautiful sunny Los Angeles, California. Today we're going to be talking about the largest of all living bird species, the ostrich. Now, ostriches are quite huge, to be honest. A male ostrich can stand about 9 feet tall, so that's about 3 feet taller than me. And a female can be about a little over 6 feet tall, so that's also a little bit taller than I am. Males can weigh up to about 350 pounds. That's also heavier than me, in case you needed to know. And females about 250 pounds, also heavier than me. So ostriches are truly the largest of all living birds. Their eggs are about this big around, about 6 inches in length and about 5 inches across is what most measure up to be. Those weigh about 3 pounds, and it's equivalent to about 2 dozen chicken eggs with the amount of egg that's inside of it. For their size, that's actually not very big considering how big the bird is themselves. But it is the biggest egg of all birds. Ostriches look a little different, male from female, and the males are black with white tips on their wings and their tail. This is my dog. His name's Nelson. Female ostriches are more grayish brown in color. They differentiate in color for a couple of different reasons. One of which is they both take turns incubating the eggs, which is kind of a big, long process. They live in kind of a loose family social group of usually less than 12 birds, somewhere in like the 6 to 10 range. Usually a dominant male ostrich and several multiple females, and maybe some of their young from like the previous year, and then as they have more chicks, those would all join their family group. And as they live in this family group or flock, the male kind of helps lead things, helps watch over and protect the rest of them. And then when it's time to lay eggs and have babies, the male digs a very shallow depression in the dirt, and the female lays the head female and the male breed, and then she lays the eggs in the nest. And then he may also breed with some of the other females, or they may also breed with other outlying males, and then they will also lay their eggs in that same nest. And so typically one female will lay anywhere from 7 to 10 eggs during their nesting season, but the other females will also lay eggs in that nest space, and they could end up with as many as like 60 eggs in one nest, because there's so many different females all contributing to the nest. And then once the nest of eggs is laid, the male and the head female kind of take turns incubating all of the eggs. So even though she knows they're not all hers, she will help incubate them, and he may also know that they're not all his, but he will take care of them for the greater good. And the head female will kind of rearrange the eggs to make sure hers are in the middle, getting the most warmth during incubation, and also the most protection from predators who may try to steal the eggs. With those 60 eggs, a good number of them may hatch, although there are a lot of things that like to try to eat ostrich eggs. So any of the smaller carnivores, some of the reptiles in the area, some big snakes, big lizards. Also things like there's a vulture called the Egyptian vulture that has learned how to drop rocks on ostrich eggs to break them open so that they can eat the insides. But as they incubate the eggs, the head female ostrich, she sits on the eggs during the daytime, and her kind of grayish brown color blends in with the dirt on the ground, so she's able to help kind of camouflage the nest while she is there, while she's sitting on it. And then the male, with his black feathers, with his black plumage, he sits on the nest during the night, and with his black feathers, he's able to kind of camouflage the nest during the nighttime. And so through that, they're able to communally raise a big group of babies. And typically a family of ostrich will have about 10 babies that hatch, but they have noticed as many as 60 with a family group. So definitely they can be very productive. Now when those babies are born, they're a little bit smaller than like a full-size chicken. So the babies start out about this tall. They grow really quick. They grow about a foot in height every month. And so at about a year old, they're pretty much full size. They'll still take a few years to develop a little further before they're considered sexually mature, but they definitely grow pretty fast, as most birds do. Ostrich chicks can run pretty quick. Within a month, they can run about 35 miles an hour and keep up with the adults. Adults, if they're being chased, can run about 43 miles an hour, which is really fast. That's their primary defense, is their speed. They're one of the fastest animals on two legs, and so they can outrun most predators, with one exception being the cheetah. Cheetahs are much faster than that. But an ostrich also is quite a bit bigger than a cheetah. So cheetahs can successfully hunt ostrich. It's rare that one cheetah is able to do that successfully. It usually takes a group of cheetahs, typically a male group of cheetahs called a coalition. But there was a well-documented group of cheetahs in Kenya called the Cheetah Brothers, and they were filmed hunting ostriches, and they were very good at doing so. I saw the Cheetah Brothers when I was in Kenya, and it was remarkable to see their cooperation in hunting. But ostrich predators would include any of the big predators in Africa. So that would be lions, leopards, hyenas, cheetahs, African painted dogs, and humans. And then of course, when they're babies, they would also have to watch out for other things, including some other birds that may try to go after the babies. Ostriches' main defense, like I said, is to run, but they are also capable of kicking to defend themselves, and that kick is very powerful. They have very powerful legs built for running, and a kick from an ostrich is capable of killing a lion and a human, or pretty much anything of that size or smaller that it kicks. Their big feet are very intimidating. Kind of an odd thing about them is that they only have 2 toes on each foot. That is different than most birds. Most birds have 3 or 4, but ostriches only have 2. Scientists feel that evolved that way to make them experts in running, less toes in the way as they run. But their toes are big. They have nice, big, strong feet. Ostriches are found typically in Africa in kind of drier places. So traditionally that included all across the edges of the Sahara Desert, both north and south of the desert. Typically they lived throughout many parts of Africa and even into the Middle East a bit. The Arabian ostrich was extinct by 1920. A big reason for that is their feathers are very fluffy, and people liked to wear their feathers, particularly in ladies' hats. And so they started to hunt ostriches for their feathers and also for their meat, sometimes collecting their eggs, other things like that. But people caused a lot of problem for ostriches about 100 years ago, and they wiped out the Middle East population of ostriches and kind of that northern area of Africa, north of the Sahara, all the ostriches there. They still exist south of the Sahara in a few little pockets, and then throughout Eastern Africa, so places like Kenya, Tanzania, and then down in the Southern African countries. They kind of like a drier climate, so they would be in any of those spaces where it's a little dry. They do not like rainforests, so they're not in the forest in Africa. They like a grassland. That's because they can find a lot of their food out there. So they eat plants, they'll eat grass, they'll eat leaves, seeds, roots, and fruits or berries off of different plants. And then they will also eat small animals, so things like insects, lizards, and rodents, and maybe some small snakes. So they're considered an omnivore. That kind of means they'll eat just about everything that they can fit into their mouth. Ostrich heads are roughly the size of my hand, kind of this shape. And if you imagine that, they're a little bit bigger than this. They have a pretty big bill or beak on the front, and then they have really big eyes. Ostriches have the largest eyes of any land animal. Their eyes are about 2 inches across. So if you imagine their heads something like this, with an eye that's pretty good size, like this dark spot on my hand, and then they have a space behind that that's about the size of a dime, that's their ear hole, and then a very large beak on the front. That doesn't leave a lot of space in their fairly small head for much brain activity going on. So in my work with ostriches, when I took care of them at the zoo, they were not particularly the smartest of animals, which was a little bit tricky to work with them. They weren't always the easiest to get to do what we needed them to do to move where we wanted them to move. They were pretty food motivated, so by putting their food in different places, we could get them to move to where their food was. But they were very curious, and they loved to be curious around us while we cleaned their exhibit. That led to ostriches being pretty curious about things like your keys if they were hanging on the edge of your pants, or a belt or a radio. And that means I got bit by an ostrich, which was not very fun. She bit me right here on my lower back, left a nice big bruise that lasted a couple weeks. She didn't break the skin, she didn't cause me to bleed, but it hurt, definitely hurt. Oh, question about how fast they can run. They can run about 43 miles an hour is the fastest that they've been clocked. They can't sustain that speed for very long, but they can run about 30 miles an hour for a very far distance. So that's pretty fast. They can run a long time going that speed, which is probably fast enough to get away from just about anything other than cheetahs. Cheetahs can run about 72 miles an hour, but cheetahs get tired really quick. So a cheetah would have to catch the ostrich pretty quick in order to successfully hunt them. Let's see. Oh, they are still threatened by humans a bit because of hunting for their food as a food source, or for their feathers, for their hide. They make leather out of ostrich, and sometimes their eggs. And then their other big threat caused by humans is habitat loss, particularly in areas where there's been a lot of drought, or there may not be very good plants growing, because people raising farm animals like cows or goats have come through, and the goats have eaten all the food. Then it's tough for the ostriches to find food. And sometimes if people are farming in the area, they will chase away ostriches because the ostriches may get into their garden areas or where they're trying to grow plants and cause some problems for the people. Particularly, people have had a hard relationship with ostriches in that northern area of Africa, just south of the Sahara Desert, to the point that they've been almost wiped out. There is an organization that is doing some really great work there in the country of Niger, where that's on the south edge of the Sahara Desert. And the organization, who is our special shout out today, called the Sahara Conservation Fund, is specifically working in Niger with the North African ostrich. And they're working on areas to help the national park where the ostriches still exist. They are supplementing some of their food to make sure they're getting enough nutrition, because they were observing the ostriches and they noticed in 2 years there were no new baby ostriches. So once they started supplementing their nutrition, that changed, and within 6 weeks they started laying eggs, and those eggs were fertile and hatched, and they had babies. Now that's important because they need to help that ostrich population expand if ostriches are going to continue to survive in that area south of the Sahara Desert, which is a hot, dry area. It's a difficult place to live for people or for animals. But the Sahara Conservation Fund is doing a lot of really great work and research there. They're also advocating right now. Ostriches are scientifically split into 2 different species, with the ostriches in northeastern Africa called Somali ostriches, and then all the other ostriches in North Africa and all the ostriches in Eastern Africa and Southern Africa are all considered one ostrich species with a couple of subspecies. And they're petitioning the science community to recognize the North African ostrich as its own species of ostrich. And if they can do that, they'll be able to get more funding for their conservation work there. The North African ostriches are also some of the biggest of all ostriches, which they have measured some males almost 10 feet in height, which is huge. Which also brings me to, at the beginning I said ostriches are the largest living bird. There was a very large flightless bird that lived on Earth not that long ago. It became extinct in the 1700s. So yeah, a couple hundred years, but long enough that people, including some scientists, did see them and were able to observe them and draw them. Those were called the elephant birds, and they lived on the island of Madagascar, which is just off the coast of southeastern Africa. Elephant birds were over 10 feet tall. Some definitely weighed over 1,000 pounds, and there's recent fossil evidence that there was a species of elephant bird that may have weighed as much as 1,700 pounds. That's a huge bird. That would be like a bird the same size as a smaller giraffe. That's pretty crazy to think of a bird that big. Definitely a big shout out to the Saharan Conservation Fund for the work that they're doing with the North African ostriches. Oh, I wanted to talk a little bit about the other great thing ostrich feathers use their feathers for. I talked about how that helps them camouflage on the nest for the females during the day, the males during the night. Ostriches use body language to communicate with each other. The males can also make a fairly loud vocalization that's called a boom. All ostriches can hiss as a threat. The boom they would use to kind of signal territory disputes with other male ostriches and also to attract ladies if they're looking for breeding. But they use their feathers to particularly court the ladies during the breeding time. And they have wings that are roughly the size of our arms, kind of. Definitely not big enough to ever lift that heavy of a bird off the ground. But the male's wings have white feathers on the tips, and so from a distance you can see those from pretty far away. A nice black wing with white tips stands out against the brown and yellow grasses, or the green grasses of Africa. And so the ostrich, the male ostrich, will start to do kind of a dance and wave his wings up and down, and then when the females get close, he starts to get a little bit lower, continually flapping his wings and then bobbing his head. I'll see if I can find a good ostrich courtship dance video to put up. It's really entertaining. I've seen it in Africa when I saw ostriches in Kenya, and I've seen it in a zoo setting, most notably at the Phoenix Zoo, where we had a very happily courtshiped ostrich community at the Phoenix Zoo. The male courted with the females there quite a bit. When I worked with ostriches in the Los Angeles Zoo, the male ostrich there was a bit old, so he didn't ever do courtship behaviors that we saw. He was in his 40s at least, which kind of brings me to another thing, which is how long ostriches can live. They've documented them into their 50s in a zoo setting. They think they can usually live into their 40s in the wild, but there has not been a lot of study about longevity of ostriches in the wild. Again, that's something we kind of are still learning with a lot of science. It takes a long time to document some of these lifespans, and you have to document a lot of individuals to see kind of what the average lifespan is. Just because you have one that makes it to 45 doesn't mean they all live to be 45 years old. You have to measure a lot of different ones. But that's our critter chat today, talking about ostriches. I'll put up some other supplemental information on the Facebook profile, so check that out later today. And be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and share content from Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube with your family and friends. Until tomorrow, I hope you have a good day. Enjoy. I hope you learned something and have some fun. Take care of yourself. Stay safe. and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.